I haven't heard this one in a while. I remember this came out when my son was like, I don't know, like just starting to talk, and he'd be in the back seat of the car, go, "Ah ba 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 bay, ba ba bay." Oh, I would crack up.
I think
Mr.
we'll
Pete
go ahead
Lawson. Mr. Pete Lawson, I just added him to the panel here.
Yes, sir.
Sweet.
Welcome, sir.
Are you a fan of this song?
Yes, I'm a fan of Will's son singing it.
Yeah. Pete's all about the bass. All about it.
The bass. That's right.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we'll leave the bass there for now and go ahead and get started with our webinar. I see several people have signed in. People are still signing in. That's good. Nice to know that we're not here talking to ourselves, let's say the least. All right, well, let me go ahead and jump in and say hello. My name is Jim Stroud. For those who don't know me, most folks call me Jim Stroud. Feel free to do the same. And in this webinar, I have a little something to share with sources, recruiters, and TA leaders that are out there. And that being, oops, hit the wrong way. Yeah, there is a shortage of women in technology, and it's been that way for a while, certainly for as long as a decade, because I've been working on projects for more than a decade, and especially for Silicon Valley companies. And back then, the need was great then. So it hasn't really changed a whole lot since 10 years ago. Now, there are a lot of articles talking about the shortage of women in technology, and those are not hard to find online. And when you read them, more often than not, there is a mention of a program for recruiting women, or there is a woman showcased as being a trailblazer of some sort in an article. However, there is one type of article that doesn't seem to be as easy to find, and that's articles or instructions or training on how to find female software developers, which is ironic because so many people out there are looking to find them and to recruit them. So we thought here at Proactive Talent, hey, how come there isn't a training out there for finding female software developers? And we thought, so why don't we make one? And so we did, and that's where we are now. This presentation is all about 5 ways, at least, of how to find or source female or women, but not men, who are developers or software engineers, being brought to you by myself and Will Staney, who is our illustrious CEO and fearless leader here at Proactive Talent. And I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about us. Will, if you would.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Yeah. So Proactive Talent is a coalition of freelance practitioners who are really helping add firepower to our clients' companies. If you think about Proactive Talent, we are like a modern RPO on demand. We help our clients from everything talent acquisition, from employer branding to a full creative recruitment marketing agency and content production, all the way through recruiting optimization, tech implementation, and our on-demand recruiting.
Very cool. Thank you, sir. We'll be hearing more from Will and a special guest rather shortly. But before we get into that, let me get into some of the 5 ways that you can find female software developers in order to recruit them. Number 1 way is to source from podcasts. Now, you might not think about podcasts in terms of recruiting or sourcing talent, but think again, it's a great way to find talent. If you do a search on iTunes, for example, there are all sorts of podcasts that are out there. These podcasts have guests, and more than likely in the description of the podcast, it'll say, so-and-so is our guest today, and their background is X, and they're wonderful people. Tune into our podcast. Pretty much that bio is sort of a mini resume about who is featured in that podcast. In addition to the guest of the podcast, there's also the host of the podcast, because even though you might not see, or after you've gone through all of their podcast descriptions for their existing episodes, the host of that podcast may know other people that you may want to reach out to, namely female software engineers. So that is definitely a resource you definitely want to talk to and network with. Now, I mentioned you can search iTunes or Apple Podcasts, as it's called now, for different podcasts where you may find female software developers. But there's also another site, which is also very handy, and it's free, called Listen Notes. You get to it by going to listennotes.com. In this example, what I did was I searched on the phrase software engineer, and then I put in the word she, because my thinking is that someone will say in their podcast description, today we are blessed to have the company of Jane Doe, and she is a software engineer for company X, right? So that's why I searched on the term software engineer in quotes and she. And you see here in the results, you have the first one is a podcast from called devpath.fm. And then the one underneath it is called Learn to Code with Me. This is a really great site. What I also like about it is that you can subscribe to the search results by RSS feed or email, as you see where the number 3 is. So you can pretty much do this search one time and then have leads come to you through email. So after you search for software engineers in this way, do it one time and then just check your email because more leads be coming your way. Now, I've used the term, again, software engineer and she, but I could have done just as easily software developer and she, or software engineer and her, or software or programmer and her or she, and so on and so on and so on. So sticking with this strategy, you can also do a search on my favorite search engine, DuckDuckGo. And here on the left-hand side, I did a search for software engineer in quotes, the pronoun she, and then also Untitled podcast, which is my way of asking DuckDuckGo, hey, search all of the web documents in your database that have the word podcast in the title. And as you see on the left-hand side of the screen, those are different episodes from different podcasts where software engineers are being interviewed, and the word she is mentioned in the description. So the presumption is that it is a female software engineer. Not in every single case, but more often than not. On the right-hand side of the screen, I'm doing the same search, but I'm doing it on Yahoo. The reason why I'm doing the search, why I did the search on DuckDuckGo and Yahoo, was to illustrate to you that you can search the same terms on different search engines and get different results. Since most people rely so heavily on Google, if you were to search DuckDuckGo and Yahoo in this way, you may find results that likely your competitors would not find because they are slavish to the Google search engine. So this is a little FYI there. The number 2 way I have for finding female software developers is to search for female authors. Female software developers write books just like male software developers do. So by doing a search on she is the author of, in quotes, and then I put in a couple of terms like Java developer, you'll see underlined in red different results. Like the first one says she is the author of the Groovy Mag, whatever. And it's a language for from the perspective of a Java developer, something like that. Then you have Angelica Langer in the second result. Further down, you have Coraline Imke, another one, Lindsay Scott. So these are all female software developers who have Java developers who have written books or written white papers or ebooks. And this is also good because not only does it help you identify female software developers, but it may help you find those that are maybe a bit more of an expert in their field, presumably because they are writing a book or a white paper or something along those lines. So that's another way to find even more qualified talent that happens to be female. Third, oops, and go back, here we go. The third way I would find female software developers is through image search. And this is what I mean with that. So in this example, what I've done is I've asked Google, look for the term software engineer or software developer. And then I click on the images link where the arrow is pointing to. Now, when I do, I get some results back, but I'm not overly excited by these results. So what I do is I click on the settings where the black arrow is on the screen, click on settings, And then I click from there, from the drop down, I choose the advanced search option. When I do, I get to a page that looks like this. You'll see at the top where it says any of these words, you see software engineer or software developer is going to automatically populate there because I arrived here from my original search. Pay attention to these 3 arrows because on the left-hand side, because that's where the magic happens. The first arrow at the top is pointing to aspect ratio. You notice it is set to tall. There are different options, but I chose tall first. Under the colors in image, I chose any color. I could have chose full color, but I tend to go with any color more often than not. And then I have type of image is face, right? So when I do that, I get to search results that look like this. I see tall images of different software engineers or software developers, and I see all their pictures. And when I get to this, what I do is I just sort of scroll through and I find, I look for pictures of people that I presume to be female. And when I do click on a photo, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a little preview of that picture will pop up. And in that preview, it usually tells the person's name, the job title, and where they work, as in this case. Not every single case, mind you, but more often than not, you do. Now, when I did that, I was somewhat happy with it, but I thought I could still do just a little bit better. So I decided to sort of tweak this a bit more, and this is what I did. So I changed my search in the search box to "she is a software engineer," in quotes. You'll notice that when I do these type of searches that pronouns are my friends here. So I typed in "she's a software engineer." And I changed, and I started reviewing them a bit more, right? And move this down a little bit. There we go. All right, so I moved that a little bit. I changed my search. And when I did that, I tweaked my results a bit more because I liked what I saw. I see a lot of females here, presumably females here in this screenshot. And since I found it from the search of "she's a software engineer," presumably they're mostly female. Not in every case, because I see this one guy here, which I assume is not a female. So there's that. But even then, I wanted to tweak it just a little bit more. So what I did was I changed the aspect ratio. It was tall initially, and you see where the dotted line is pointing to. I chose the option square. Now I have a bunch of square images. Why is that significant? Well, square images are not tall images. So I'm seeing a whole new batch of results of more female software developers overall. So by changing my ratio, I get more results. Even no matter how many times you search Google, if you search Google and there are maybe 20,000 results or 1 million results, Google is only going to show you at most 1,000 at a time. So by doing a search with the aspect ratio in mind, you're refining those results even better and getting to more of what you want. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, type a question and we'll get into that in the Q&A section. Now, also did "she's a software engineer." Of course, I could have also searched on "she's a software developer," "she's a programmer," "software tester," et cetera, et cetera. All right. So that was Google. And this is what I've done also on Bing, which is another search engine. I just did a search on female software engineer. Now, what I like about Bing is that it gives me a lot of recommended searches or suggestions. So when I did a search on female software engineer, you'll notice that in the bluish green, I don't know what the right color is, in the bluish box there, you have other suggested searches, such as Black female software engineer, Chinese female software engineer, female software developer, and so on. So that can help my diversity searches even more if I'm in the mindset of looking for more diverse candidates. And again, this is another reason why it's important to search beyond Google, because Google is so relied upon. I think it has like 90% of the search market, like in the world, right? So everybody's on Google and they're getting Google results. But if you're searching DuckDuckGo, if you're searching Yahoo, if you're searching Bing, if you're searching other search engines out there, you're going to find results that your competitors might not necessarily be looking at because they're being slaves to Google, right? That was 3. The fourth way that I would find female software developer is this way, which is the story of Isis Winegar. Don't know if you guys are familiar with Isis. She has a very interesting story. She was featured on a recruiting poster that received a lot of backlash. Essentially, it was this poster that was in a subway station in Chicago or New York, I forget where. But basically, it had her picture and it said, hey, we're hiring, come go to our career site, something like that, right? And so when you look at it, you think, okay, just a regular recruiting poster. Well, she got a lot of backlash directed directly at her, right? And the reason why she got a lot of backlash is that people were complaining that she was too pretty to be a software engineer. Apparently, if you are an attractive woman, you don't have any brains, as some people think. Well, when news of that response got back to her, she was justifiably offended, in my opinion. And so she created a little poster with her Sharpie there. She's holding it up. And basically, she tweeted out the message that I build enterprise software and hashtag I look like an engineer in order to rebel against the backlash that, hey, women can be pretty and smart at the same time. And so she posted that up. When she did with that hashtag, a curious thing happened. Other women heard about her story, and they were also software engineers, and they started to post pictures of themselves with the hashtag I look like an engineer. And so they started posting tweets like this on Twitter and also in other social media. And when I saw that, I said, okay, that's really interesting, really empowering. And it's also something for me to say thank you, because at the time I was looking to recruit female software engineers. So when I heard about that story and that hashtag, I just went through Twitter and looked at all the software developers that happened to be female who were tweeting with that hashtag. And I said, thanks for making my sourcing project that much more easier to perform. So this is another cool way to find female software engineers who, in a lot of cases, didn't necessarily have their profiles up on LinkedIn because they didn't want to be hounded by recruiters. So this is a way to find, I found a lot of people this way who were under the radar, so to speak. Now, I look like an engineer was a very, it's a very good hashtag to search on, but it wasn't the only hashtags. I found several others out there. Such as women in tech being one, STEM, hashtag girls, so forth. WO grammar, which is sort of short for women programmer. That was really interesting. Also, you notice one on here too called Hey Ya Tim Hunt. Now that was that was really interesting. All right, so Tim Hunt was the scientist, right? And he really stuck his foot in his mouth because he said that. And you think I'm making this up, but look him up yourself. He said that he didn't like working in the laboratory with women because they tended to be distracted by, I guess, his obvious good looks, and they weren't able to work with him. And when you look at this guy, I'm like, I don't know about that one, Tim. But look up Tim Hunt and the hashtag Hey Ya Tim Hunt. And when you look on Twitter, you're going to find women who are scientists who are tweeting about the work they're doing and saying, hey, Tim Hunt, I'm too busy working here in the laboratory to look at you. So really interesting story there. You definitely want to check it out. And number 5, track articles on Twitter. Now, this is a nice little trick that I sort of stumbled across, and hopefully it'll serve you well as it did me. When you find an article that would appeal to female software engineers or whatever demographic you're looking for. In this case, I'm looking for female software developers. So when I saw this article of how 20 women in engineering discovered their passion for technology, I thought this is an article that would resonate with the audience that I'm trying to recruit or trying to source for. So I copied the URL and I went over to Twitter and I pasted the URL in the search box. And when I did that, I saw a bunch of it'll reveal different tweets of people who have tweeted that article, right? And so when I did that, I noticed that the people who tweeted that article tended to be Twitter accounts that focused on technology. And they also tended to focus on female software groups or organizations like SWE, Society of Women Engineers, and things like that. Not in every case, but more often than not, I started seeing that. So I started to take note of it. And these are some of the ones that stood out to me the most. Fab Femmes was one. Her STEM career was another one. STEMettes, Sisters Community. And what I did also with these, once I made like this list of what were the top accounts, the top Twitter accounts that were tweeting this particular article, I looked at, okay, who was the account? Can I network with the person behind that Twitter account to see if they can refer some female software developers to me? I looked at people who were tweeting to those accounts, and I looked at who they were. I looked at their profiles rather. So I said, okay, people who tweet to Zimba women, for example, they tended to be women who had an interest in technology or STEM related work. So that was a way for me to find them that way. And then I also paid attention to who these accounts tweeted out to. And not every time, but on several instances, they tended to be female software developers or female engineers and so forth. So by, again, searching on that article link about female engineers, I was able to find people who were tweeting about that article. I saw the accounts, network with the people who held those accounts. I looked at who they talked to and who talked to them. And I was able to find quite a few female software developers that way. All right. That was a mouthful of a lot of what I hope you would think is a lot of sourcing goodness. At this point, what I want to do, I want to pass it over to Will, and he's going to talk about a really interesting case study. We did a lot of great work with Postmates and a lot of great, interesting results from that. So Will, I'm going to turn it over to you and our special guest. So take it away, sir.
Great. Thank you so much. So, as important it is to find this great talent of female engineers and software developers, a really important aspect is really how do we attract them as well to come to us? And that is exactly what we helped Postmates do over this last year. And with me, I've got their VP of talent acquisition, Pete Lawson. Jim, you may have to give him the ability to turn on his video.
Sure. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Got audio though, so I'm here.
Welcome.
Mouth will not move, but I am here.
And I thought I saw a screenshot of you a second ago, give or take. Maybe I didn't. I thought I did. I saw your name pop up.
Yep.
He's
in the panelist. I think you just have to turn on his video, or you might want to just make him a co-host real quick. That'll be the fastest way.
Yeah, I think I'll do that.
Awesome. With that, I'll go ahead and start introducing Pete, and then we can dive into it. But Pete has been a TA leader for well over a decade at awesome companies like fast growth startups like Zenefits, Anaplan, and now Postmates, really building those teams out from scratch, leading them on just a huge amounts of growth. And you can tell, we started working Postmates pre-pandemic, and then during the pandemic, seeing them really go through this transition from, a convenience brand into really an essential service, getting people, battling towards, food scarcity and being able to deliver food in times where we can't all be out and about. It's just been an amazing thing to see what Pete and his team have been able to accomplish, and being a part with them over the last year has been awesome. And there's Pete. So Pete, tell us a little bit, I know when we first chatted, over a year ago, a big initiative for Postmates was attracting more female tech, so give us a lay of the land of what was it, what were some of your challenges initially about a year ago?
Yeah, I think, first of all, video's good, right? I've seen it myself, so that's nice. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I think honestly, our challenges are not uncommon. I think, a lot of our challenges were We're a hyper growth company growing in every facet, like you said, fast forward. I got here before COVID, but fast forward to COVID, that just, completely put everything on steroids. But when I first arrived, it was still a very, very hyper growth environment, trying to acquire the best and brightest, tech talent in the Valley, as everyone else we're competing against is trying to do. Similar opportunity, which was, we really just didn't have a brand. We had a really strong consumer brand. There was no brand strategy from a talent acquisition standpoint, no employer brand. A lot of people knew us as like where they get their burritos from, really cutting edge, really cool pop culture brand and all the things. And so as far as attracting talent, that wasn't something that we were having a problem doing. I think it was attracting the right talent, and the specifically, female tech talent to our brand was a huge gap. So that was a big opportunity. As you know, you're a huge part of that. So step one was reach out to Will. Step two was really just get a complete understanding of just our environment. Obviously we can do the analytics from our applicant pool, but also just truly understanding like what were the behaviors of different underrepresented minorities and gendered, and ethnicity, everything when it comes to looking, demographically at our talent and how they're getting through our process and the entire experience. That was another part of it. But the first hurdle was top of funnel. How do we really increase, female tech talent within both product and engineering? So again, not uncommon issues. Some of the first things we tackled was just understanding, who we were and where we could really amplify our existing female talent within engineering and product. And that's where we started to get to work with you all.
Yeah. And it's really been one of the most fun projects I think we've done to date. You and your team have just been awesome. You have a really sharp, awesome team. And then Jim and I even got to go in and do some training with your recruiting team as well on some of these out of the box sourcing tactics. And so, to be a partner, helping you both in your sourcing strategy, but then also the attraction strategy. So, for those on the webinar, the first thing we started to tackle was the employee value proposition, just doing design thinking workshops, talking to just the awesome female talent that was there at Postmates, as well as the men and everyone else as well. But, and helping define, what is that experience of working at Postmates? And if you go to the next slide, and it was, getting that message out there. It's one thing to say, we're hiring female engineers. It's another to, empower your own female engineers to tell their stories and put it out there and for them to advocate. We did partnerships with, Fairy Godboss, the Muse, Built In, some of these local, very targeted microsites to highlight, is very intentional. With the testimonials, we wanted, when female engineers were thinking about Postmates, when their sources reached out, for them to be able to go online and really research it and hear from other female engineers, because it's one thing for the recruiter to say it. It's another for us to say it's a great place to work on the career site. It's another when they see another female engineer talking about what it's been like. We were very intentional in making sure that we included female engineers and employees wherever we could, wherever it made sense, so they can really see themselves at Postmates. Next one.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that too.
Please.
Just that. Exactly. I mean, this is the next slide, but we went out there. Obviously, you want to make sure, we told the market what a great place it was to work for, female engineers, for everyone, with what engineering is like, specifically highlighted through the lens of a female engineer. And like you said, had a multi-channel approach to that. I think what's key too is the consistency. So once someone's interested, they understand ourselves out in the market, the brand, and then they go to our career site and then they, see a dude fest, that does not work to continue that storyline. And I think, a lot of the work that, again, we partnered with that was really helpful from a career site standpoint was, one, looking at, how are our job descriptions written, how just doing a full audit, understanding what are the personas we're really trying to attract or deflect, and then putting that work back into how we're appearing from a posting standpoint, and then also on our career site. And so when you're an experienced, you're a female engineer and you're getting this kind of drip out in the market within your social, wherever we're showing up and we're saying, hey, it's great. It's great. Come work here. And then you come to our career site to see your opportunities. We leverage the tool of Eightfold to create our career site and really, really personalize the content. So you coming to that site will have a curated content that's specific to you and your background and your experiences, so that consistency of how we built the brand in the market is consistent also with the experience someone has as they go to look at different opportunities.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so, we wanted to also empower hiring managers to write better job descriptions to, and where they, where we were more intentional about language uses and kind of combating, some of that unconscious bias in the hiring process. And so we actually built out, these resources for hiring managers. It's a true job posting guide, walking them through how to use some of the narrative that we built, but also to write it themselves in a way that just really highlights the day-to-day of what it'll be like, to get the job descriptions away from being, just person descriptions and really descriptions of the job and the impact that they'll make in that job. And I think just the narratives that we heard, interviewing some of the engineers at Postmates were just around like the impact that they're making right now during COVID. And we wanted to be very intentional in not only just highlighting female engineers or highlighting engineering and the engineering process at Postmates, but specifically what it was like during COVID. Because how Postmates treated their employees during this time was just, I think, a masterclass. And we wanted every potential candidate to see that, not just what is it like typically. I think a lot of employers were still sharing, images of people in the office at that time. We were not. We did a whole video campaign. If you go to the next slide, highlighting, the various departments at Postmates, specifically engineering, and we made sure to have a lot of their great female talent featured in those videos. And the narratives, you can find this this series. It's Inside Postmates series on YouTube, and in here from these amazingly talented women talk about the real impact they get to make. That these 3 started marketplaces, these small businesses that they're helping through their technology, these working moms who are trying to both homeschool and do this, but don't have time to make lunch, so that they're able to order that lunch later on. So right at lunchtime, it shows up. Like the fact that they're building technology that allows this crazy time to just be that much easier for that stay-at-home mom. It let them know that they're building product for women like them, specifically, which was just super powerful of a campaign. Pete, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I think, you nailed it. I think where we're really just able to just open up and have a look inside of like what, like you said, like what you would be doing as a female engineer and the impact you have. That story just didn't exist. It was just kind of in the, just everybody was creating their own vacuum of a story themselves. Yeah. And I think being able to kind of really articulate, and I think a lot of times that's taken for granted, like anyone working within any company that's inundated within their work sometimes kind of forgets that the perspective is lacking on the outside. And I think, me personally, that's why I do love partnering with you, Will, or a third party, to say like, give me a different point of view, like help me understand like how we're being seen in the market. And I think after some of that work, and then through some of these videos, if you all check it out, I think it's powerful. And from that, we got some really nice results as a result of that, of just sharing the story, just really literally just sharing experiences that people are going through.
It was raw too. Like we do all kinds of video production at Private Talent. We've done really high caliber, highly produced video and stuff like that. But this, what do we used? Just Zoom, right, Pete? Like Zoom. Zoom calls that we just recorded. We just had organic conversations with them, completely unscripted, just asking about their experience. We just recorded it, edited it together into a great real narrative that exists there. And Jim, if you go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about the results, right? We launched this campaign, at the end of Q2. And you can see the results were that we increased female applicants by 52% from Q2 to Q3. And then during this whole year, and we started with Postmates back in September of last year. We're still working with them today. By September 2020, applicants with female candidates have gone up 91%.
Yeah.
In a single year.
And I think a more interesting, like, those are great numbers and we've absolutely loved it. I think the even more interesting number on top of that is 53% of all those applicants meet or exceed the qualifications for the role. So
source quality.
Source quality, exactly. So it's like, yeah, you can get a bunch of female applicants. That's wonderful, but if you're not creating a good experience for them, i.e., don't have anything that will fit them, but you're getting female talent, that's kind of for nothing. Like, how are we specifically tapping the talent that we want to be interested in our brand, that we think can add value, that we can really help from a career standpoint? And that 53% is something we're definitely proud of.
Yeah. And I got to give kudos to your team too, and your sourcing team for, like, I think there's a lot of clients that we help build content for and help them build their EV strategies, but then there's only so much we can affect on how they utilize that and really put it to use with their recruiters. Like, your team has been using these videos, using these team highlights in their outreach in those sourcing. So it's one thing to find, use all these awesome tricks that Jim just shared at the beginning of this webinar to find this female talent. It's another to then really connect with them and engage them in a way that makes them want to talk to you, and that that you this isn't, you aren't just reaching out saying, hey, we're really trying to get diversity hires here at X company. You're saying, no, we're trying to hire great people like you. And then here's a video, of from one of your peers, that can really vouch for what we're trying to tell you here. You want to get on a call, and they saw, the conversion of their outreach skyrocket by using more dynamic content, by really telling stories.
Yeah. And just arming the rest, our hiring managers or other people within the organization with this content. Cause we all know probably on this call that, no one, for the most part, no one wants to hear from recruiters, like, they just get inundated with us, and that's just how it goes. And, but when you're, I leveraging my, whether it's the head of engineering or product or ICs on the team. And that is definitely something I would definitely, put my thumb down on it, as anyone listening, of, how do we just, empower the rest of the organization doing that work, and created a lot of this organic growth. I think, is whether it's putting in your footer or showing up on LinkedIn or other social media and kind of pushing this out more organically. The traction and the kind of stickiness of it was a lot more effective than a bunch of recruiters yelling from about.
Yeah. And what I love is your employees went beyond just sharing our content. Like, your engineer leaders were doing LinkedIn posts. And when the hiring managers were sharing, that they were hiring on their teams, the way that they articulated, they used the narrative around impact and brand magic and stuff that we found in the EVP, but they used their own words. But everyone was saying different things, but it was all consistent in the things that we did in our research and found were true about working at Postmates. So and all along the way, you guys treated us completely as a part of your team. We were in the weekly calls with you guys. It's been awesome partnering with you guys. And we look forward to continue doing so as you guys ramp up your growth with the recent Uber acquisition and all of that. So just thank you so much for your partnership, Pete, and for coming on here. And with that, we can open up to Q&A. You guys feel free to have questions for Pete, myself, or Jim on the sourcing tactics he shared. But we got about 15 minutes or so to answer any live Q&A you guys got.
And with that, let me open up the chat here and open up for questions. And again, if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about in terms of sourcing, anything in terms of attracting talent, definitely bring those up as well. We have a couple of more sourcing suggestions that I can show as well, which I will show in a few minutes after we take a few questions. But just for now,
bonus content. Yeah.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to get some thank yous and some positive comments on what we presented so far. So it's good to know people are still awake at this point.
Yeah. Thanks, Dean. Yeah. He's saying how he appreciated the info, Jim. You're always
cool,
a source of great sourcing knowledge.
Cool.
Jim, I would love to know what season was that photo taken?
What season?
Background. Yeah.
Oh, this. Oh, yeah. This is The Office. Oh, what season? I think it was from the last season, actually. I'm a big Office fan. You know, right there is where Dwight would sit.
You're at the door.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, cool. I think people are still forming their questions together. I think what I'll do is I'll share a few more sourcing strategies, give people a bit more time to get their questions together, and and then we'll come back to this. And also, and people, these are also the articles that I cited in the presentation, just in case people want to do a little bit more research on the phenomenon of women in technology or the lack thereof, and how people are trying to resolve that. So I'll send this out later on as well.
Awesome.
Which brings us to the Crackerjack section, the bonus tips, in case we have a little bit more time. And it seems like we do. So I'll throw out a few more suggestions. This next suggestion it's kind of obvious. It's one of those things where you look at it and it's like, well, that's obvious, but why haven't I done this before? and I wish I could take credit for this. I actually learned this at a sourcing summit conference a few years back. And I always thought it was a great suggestion because it was so obvious. All right, if you're looking for female software developers or software engineers or any female type of candidate, try a search like this on LinkedIn, in quotes, on maternity leave. Now, men tend not to go on maternity leave, but if you do a search on maternity leave,
I did put my parental leave in my LinkedIn, but okay. I just put super dad for 3 months. That was a job I had for 3 months when my daughter was born.
Very cool. Very cool. But yeah, on maternity leave, and then you may want to click on filters and refine it by industry background or company or what have you. But you'll be surprised. Just searching on maternity leave by itself in the United States, you get almost 10,000 results at the time of the screenshot. So that's something you definitely want to add to your bag of tricks. Something else you may want to try as well is this. Where is it? Yes. Type in a female name or traditionally female name. So in this case, I asked Google, look for the word Maria in the title of your documents. Also look for the word resume in the title of your search results. And then also look for the word software developer or software engineer, which is what this pipe symbol means. Then I have minus sample, minus template, minus example, because I don't want sample resumes or template resumes or example resumes, which I was getting quite a bit initially. And so when I did this search, I didn't get a lot of results, 28, but these are 28 results that you probably would have overlooked before.
And you can put multiple names, right? Like, like just to, go pull a whole database of typically female names and just to get a larger result, right?
Exactly. So you can do Maria, Jennifer, whatever. You may want to do a search online for baby names, female baby names. And if you've drawn a blank on what kind of names to use, and you'll find software engineers or the software developers that happen to have that female sounding name. And more often than not, they will be women. So there's that. Something else too, this is interesting. You probably know that. I've already noticed this inside of LinkedIn. People are listing their pronouns or their preferred pronouns in their LinkedIn profiles. She, her, hers being among them. So when I did a search on LinkedIn for she, her, hers, and software engineering quotes, what do you know? I found some software engineers who appear to be women. More people are doing this now than when I did this shot earlier this year. So all that to say, doing a search on she, her, hers, or just she, or just her, or what have you, you'll find different female software engineers with this method as well. So those are all of my sourcing tricks, as I like to call them today. I'm going to check one more time for questions to see if we have any questions from people who want to sign out. Yes, go ahead.
So far, just a lot of Very nice words. Thank you guys. Just so he really likes the format. Yeah, I agree. I think we'll keep this one. We're going to be doing a lot more of these as we go into the new year as well. Just, last 6-9 months as we've been going through this COVID time, I know Jim and I, we've just really been focused on just getting content out in the market to help folks at this time, giving as much free stuff as we can, just so we can help out and uplift the community within talent acquisition. You'll see in the resources, if you check out our website or our blog, we've got a lot of resources, beyond just female hiring, but we've got a employer and budget tool that we've put out there, a recruiting process for startups that we put out recently, a bunch of other stuff to check out.
Yeah. We're quite proud of the content. We also have this, I forget the recruiting marketing matrix. So if you are
CRM, shopping
CRM,
for CRMs.
Yeah. So if you're trying to evaluate an HR tech tool and you don't know what to look for, or maybe you want a list of questions to ask and you want to compare it to another tool, we have a free downloadable for that kind of thing as well. I would encourage everyone to go over to blog.proactivetalent.com and subscribe because we have a lot of content, some sourcing stuff like this, a lot of information that would be of interest to talent acquisition leaders for sure. And then we also have a lot of information about what's going on in the world of work. We have a series called Tripod, where we interview different people who are related to the HR industry. We have Tribe TV, which is a video series that examines the world of work. A lot of great, interesting content there. I highly suggest subscribing to our blog, and you'll get a lot of great information like that.
Yeah, and also anything that we mentioned in my section. If anybody wants to chat offline or dig deeper into some of that, some of the stuff that we did that was really successful. It's not just female was one giant barrier that we needed to continue to accomplish and get a lot more female talent in the organization, but also a lot of other underrepresented minority groups that we've been really incorporating in our DEI recruitment strategy. That has, we've had some really good success. Thank you, Will, and the partnership there. We've done a lot of stuff. So happy to nerd out about it with anyone that wants to talk offline about it too. So
yeah, cool. I think y'all increased by over 30% across the DEI categories. Yeah.
34.
34? My bad. Yeah.
Well, who's counting? Well, cool. If there are no further questions, comments, or concerns.
Oh, I see one from Joseph. He says,
okay, go ahead.
I don't know who this is to, but someone will tackle it. What if your current team doesn't have female engineering talent? Any tips? That's a good one. Yeah.
They should contact us.
That's a good one. And it does come up because we work with a lot of early stage startups and, early stage startups where, it's maybe two male co-founders and they started the company kind of hiring their fraternity brothers and people that they were close with or worked, right? And eventually you have to go, okay, now we really need to scale and we need from a business imperative standpoint to start attracting more diverse candidates, more females into our leadership team. I think when you're at that point, it's up to your male leaders to talk about and be honest with that fact. And not be afraid to go out and say, hey, look, we're only 50 people right now, or we're in an industry that's historically, underrepresented when it comes to females, but we want to be a part of changing that and launch your mission, launch your intention, and you will see great female talent say, yeah, I love that they're being honest and I want to help them achieve that goal of getting more clients. And, I think when you put something out into the world answers you back. You just have to be afraid. You just can't be afraid to admit it because it's pretty apparent. All you have to do is look at your website and look at your About Us page and they'll know it. So you might as well call it out and be honest. And I think you start there and then you get that first ambassador, that first, female on the leadership team who champions that. And then they go to market with you to help recruit the rest, just like if you're building any other team. You want to make sure everybody compliments, right? So that's what I would do. And that's what I did. I mean, when I started Proactive Talent, at first it was just me. and then a couple of, friends. And now, we've got a leadership team where me and Jim are the only ones who are male on that team. That it is over 70% diverse. I'm the only, white male on our leadership team, right? Like that, it took intention in us saying that, like, and saying we want to emulate what we want our clients to do. And now we have just a great and diverse team, not just in gender and ethnicity, but from different backgrounds and skill sets and personality styles and work styles. I think all of that is super, super important when you're thinking about how to build high performing teams and high profit companies. It's just a business imperative now.
Yeah. Peter, you want to add?
One other thing I was going to add on is just a little bit more of the same what you're saying, Will, but yeah, there's got to be other female talent within your organization that you could leverage to talk about what it's like to work there and what you're building and why that person's plugged into the mission, all the things that hopefully leads back to what engineering is building. And it is a bit of a domino effect. So like you're saying, well, just own your stuff. If you don't have it, talk about it, talk about what you're hoping to accomplish, where you're hoping to go, where you're hoping to be. But I think, leveraging other, female leaders or female talent within the organization outside of engineering is totally fine to help demonstrate, what you're hoping to incorporate more into the engineering and product teams, but also help illustrate and kind of tell a story of just what's it like just to work there as a female, So, yeah. Because if your only brand out there is like, it's a dude fest in engineering and there's no female talent, immediately I would think like most females would be less apt to hit that apply button. If you're hearing from other female talent within the organization outside of engineering, just what the culture is like, what the leadership team is like, where we're owning, our misses, where we want to, go in the future, that you're going to have a lot more people interested in, let me hear more. And hopefully you're telling more in that process to help create that first start of the domino effect of getting more female talent within the product eng time team.
That's great. And Pete, any tips on how to measure that along the way, or even to set goals? I feel like when I was a TA leader and all this really started hitting ahead, in like, I don't know, like 2014, 2015, you're seeing the New York Times posts and stuff. I'd have leadership come to me like, all right, going forward, I want, 33% of candidates that you guys send to us be female on the engineering team. And I'm like, but they don't like, how do you set goals that aren't just sort of, I don't know, what's the term that they use where you just set like these lofty goals that are completely unattainable just to showcase that you're trying, but they're not really. I feel like, can we at least just start with equal representation? If there's 5% of female in the available talent pool, can we create goals to be representative of the market first, and then say, okay, now we're going to create stretch goals to go beyond that? Like, how are you guys, how are you doing it there at Postmates?
Yeah. I mean, I think just the comment just generally on that is, understand what your business objective goals are, what's your organizational goals, how does that trickle down to each individual person, and how are they plugging into those initiatives for whether it's that next year or quarter or whatever. And then you can really back into those goals from a TA perspective on anything really, whether it's, looking for female talent for, like I said, on the tech side, or if it's, underrepresented minority groups on the early talent side, or any of that, like you really can back into that through larger, business objectives. I think my opinion is, have where I think there's a lot of misses is like you say, companies will put out these giant goals and everybody's just focused on that. And they stop focusing on, and then they're focused on the end of the process and like, well, we have a female and a male. Oh, our goal is to get to 12%. Let's just choose the female because we need to do like now, like from a culture and brand standpoint, you're just blowing it. Like you're just self-destruction, in my opinion. So I think what's more tangible, have an understanding of what the market can hold. What's the addressable market for each of those groups you're trying to recruit for? Have that just knowledge. Without that, you're flying blind. And two, just know where you're at today. If you have zero female talent within engineering and product, it's a crazy goal, in my opinion, unless you're a team of one, to say we're going to have 10% by Q1. I think what's more realistic is saying, all right, well, where's our problem? Oh, we don't have enough people at the top of the funnel. Let's address that problem. And then also with that, let's address, do we have an unbiased and really thorough process for how we screen and talk to candidates throughout the entire experience? Once you address those two things, and for the most part, everything works out unless you have such a toxic culture in general. That's a whole nother problem in itself. And then, putting whatever recruitment strategy on top of that is lipstick on a pig. But I would say, just focus on the top of funnel goals, focus on your optimizing your process to make it repeatable and fair across the board. And then give that a quarter or two, and then start to set very specific goals around D&I. I think where companies just go right after D&I goals without even having measured anything yet, you're just setting yourself up to possibly whiff or be frustrated. I think there's steps to get there.
Absolutely.
Cool. I'll add in one last thing because we're almost at the time. I would say always remember that you are in competition. What are you willing to do to make your company more attractive than the next company? You may want a lot of female software developers in your company, but so does Google, so does Yahoo, so does Facebook, and all the others. Even if you don't have the budget per se of those type of companies, there are maybe some small things you can do on a cultural level, on a small basis that can be attractive to that demographic as well. Maybe reach out to different associations like SWE, Society of Women Engineers, and maybe ask them, what are the different types of perks that your members appreciate when they're in the workforce, and then pick the ones that you can afford to implement. Maybe that could be a good place to go too, because if you were to attract and hire several female software developers, what good is it if they don't want to stay there because the culture isn't there? You have a revolving door. That could be worse. I would say exponentially worse, because then they'll go over the glass door and vent, and that'll make it even harder to find more in the future. So I would say create a culture that they want to work and they want to stay in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I see we're about at time, and we have no more questions. But if you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. Again, find us at proactivetalent.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you so much for being here, Peter Lawson from Postmates.
Thanks for joining us, Pete. We literally just asked him on Friday, hey, you want to be on a webinar next Monday? So appreciate that, man.
All good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
All right, everyone. Talk to you guys. See you next time on a future webinar.
Got it.